Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Pranzata Podcast. I am your host, Andrea Pranzatelli, and today I have a very special guest. This is Caitlin Michelle. She is a stand-up comedian in New Jersey. She's also a multi-creative, which I just recently found out. I only met her one time, so this is going to be a fun episode because I'll get to know her. But she's also a musician, an artist, so she's got a lot of things going on. But anyways, I have a lot of questions for her. Before we get into it, don't forget to hit subscribe and like. This is a podcast where I interview local New Jersey comedians and musicians and other types of artists and entrepreneurs. If you're into that kind of thing, don't forget to hit subscribe, like, and comment on anything that we talk about throughout the podcast, because sometimes I like to get into some controversial stuff and it's interesting, to hear what you guys have to say. But anyways, let's get right into it. So she knows, because we were just talking about this, that I like to start off with an icebreaker question that has nothing to do with comedy or music or anything. So okay. I'm going to make it less intense than I harassed my other guests.
I watched one of her previous episodes and I was like, oof, I'm in for it.
Yeah, I'm trying to learn as I go. And I'm like, all right, maybe that was a little too far for like the first time having somebody at my house. I'm like, what's your darkest secrets? Or whatever I ask. So this one's actually like a nice one. It's a friendly one.
Okay.
If you became wildly successful right now and you had tons of money, what would you invest your money in?
Ooh, investing. Well, I don't know anything about stocks, investments. I mean, do you mean invest my money into growing it?
Not necessarily, like
just what would
charitable cause. Like, okay. would you do something charitable with it? Like, I want to start this type of organization or donate it to this, or would you be like, nah, like I want to what word am I trying to say? Frugalistly spend my, correct me if I'm wrong about that. Spend my money and like get a huge house and like what would be your thing?
Yeah, I would definitely try and do a little bit of both. I love shopping, so I would probably treat myself to a lot of new nice clothes, nice shoes, nice makeup. Probably upgrade my apartment. Yeah, I could get out of New Brunswick. I could afford to do that, hopefully, if I had enough money. And part of it, I would definitely donate to different organizations like Planned Parenthood. I would probably donate to a lot of like mutual aid funds around New Jersey or around the country. Yeah, that's a really good question. Now I'm going to be pondering this all night.
Yeah, it might be one of those questions that like you don't have like an answer on the spot for because you have to think about it. But it's like something that's been on my mind. I'm like, if I was successful, like what would I do with my money? Right. I would probably do something similar where I would like split it up, okay, I'm going to treat myself to these things, but maybe have like an I wouldn't mind like helping my family out of their debt, that type of thing.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I would definitely pay off all my student loans, probably all my friends' student loans. If we're talking unlimited money, then like there's a lot of bills that can be paid.
Okay, so let's get into the questions about your craft. So we were just saying how you're a multi-creative. What would you say is your, if you have one, what would you say is your main form of expression that like you're the best at all these things? Like out of all these things, I'm the best at music, the best at artist, like what comedy, what would you think is your thing?
That's a good question. As of recent, I would definitely say comedy because it's the one I've been doing the most. I've been keeping up with the most. But throughout my life, I've found that I've gone through cycles of creativity. So I played piano for many years when I think I started when I was like 12 or 13. And I played all the way through high school into college. And I got really good for a while. And then I didn't practice piano for a few years. And I actually just recently started playing again. And I'm like, wow, I'm so rusty. And I'm like nowhere near the talent I had prior to when I stopped.
I'm obviously a piano player. I have a big piano right there. Yeah. So that's interesting to me. What kind of piano did you play? Like classical or rock?
I definitely started with classical. I took lessons when I was 12 or 13 for a few months. I eventually quit lessons because I really wasn't a fan of my teacher. But they taught me a lot of classical piano. And then after that, I was mainly self-taught. So I did a lot of like YouTube tutorials. I bought music books. It was mainly like pop and rock songs to start. But once I learned how to read sheet music, I was pretty decent at like covering songs and whatever I really listened to at the time. So in high school, I did a lot of like, I was on a big like MGMT kick and I did a lot of MGMT covers. I've done like Regina Spektor covers. I've done kind of like contemporary pop stuff.
Yeah, I really wanted her to perform because I had Erin, who is a comedian who also used to be a singer. And I was like, you need to perform something. So I always love like forcing my guests to tell me their darkest secrets and perform things that they haven't performed in years. So maybe one day we'll meet again and do it. But that's really awesome. Definitely. I can relate to the like having creative cycles because I'm the same way. Never got really big into like drawing and painting, I wouldn't say. But I'm definitely like comedy and music. Those are my two things. Definitely, I would say music is definitely like my specialty. I'm pretty new at comedy, so
yeah.
Next question. Okay, all right. So this question someone had asked me weeks ago, and I was like, I need to save this and recycle it with a guest so that I have like ideas to bounce off of with somebody. And I figured you would be good to ask because you're a female. So it has to do with female comics.
Okay.
But what do you think about this? Like, there's some people who will say like females who talk about sex primarily on stage are not being creative. Do you have any opinions about that? Because I've heard mixed opinions. Like I
think that's dumb.
Agreed.
And the reason is because like, do they think it's dumb or do they think it's not creative when men talk about sex on stage?
I guess what I've heard, like a lot of the opinions I've heard is like, oh, they're just doing it to be just for the shock value. But when you just resort to sex every single time, you're stunting your creativity and your growth. But the person I think of is Nikki Glaser. I don't know if you're familiar with Nikki Glaser, but she's a raunchy, like sexual comic, but like you can tell she genuinely like loves these jokes. And as long as the jokes get better and better and she's like crafting it in a way, like finessing it in such a way with everything, with the artistry of it, with like the spacing and the cadences and all that stuff. I'm like, what the fuck does it matter what you're talking about if you're getting a reaction from the audience? But I'm just like curious to know if you've ever heard that before.
I've heard that it's easier for women to joke about sex because women are sexualized. So a lot of people will look at a woman talking about sex on stage and be like, oh, that's such a cop out because like she can talk about it and get reactions. But I do agree with everything you just said. And I don't think it's necessarily like stunting your growth. If it's the only thing you ever joke about, sure, maybe like broaden your horizons. But the same way people joke about a lot of overdone topics like politics or family or sex, I just think it's one of those things that it's very relatable. It's very easy to make fun of because there's a lot of like humor in it.
Yeah.
And no, I don't think that it would be any like less creative for a woman to joke about sex than it would be for a man because oftentimes they have very different experiences in sex.
And that's another thing too. It's like there isn't I don't know the exact statistics, but there isn't a huge amount of women in comedy. So like it is interesting to hear like, you know, so many men joke about sex. It's interesting to hear what a woman would have to say and like what her perspective would be, just so like the male listeners can kind of get an idea like, oh, that's what women think kind of thing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
But yeah, so I'm glad we're on the same page about that. But comment in the comment section, like, what do you think? As if you're a comic or just like a listener of comedy, do you think it's like a cop out if women talk about sex and get attention for that? I don't think so, but I'm curious to know what you guys think about that. So let me know in the comment section. Okay, so you had mentioned to me before that you were big on like mental health awareness and that type of stuff. So I'm curious, like what is something that you do like regularly as a routine that keeps you in check, like spirituality or meditation? Is there something that you do that you feel like you have to resort to this each week to make sure you're kind of like mentally in check?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I journal a lot. And I try to, like, I never used to journal, and I do have anxiety. And I used to, when I would have these really like anxious moments, I would kind of try and distract myself with other things, whether it was like TV or hanging out with my friends or drinking or whatever. And recently I've switched from distracting myself from my feelings and actually really feeling my feelings. And now I write in my journal pretty often when I have something on my mind. And it really helps. Like, it really helps me feel whatever it is I'm feeling and almost like not only purge it, but work it out with myself, because I'm a very like analytical person. I really like to think things through. I like to understand things. And when I'm journaling, it's almost like I'm talking to myself and like figuring it out.
Like you can see yourself from the outside. That's so funny you say that because I'm kind of going through a similar thing. I've also had like a lot of anxiety in my life. I've been on medication, like anti-anxiety medication, Zoloft, for like 3 years now. And I'm going off of it not for the first time. I tried to go off of it cold turkey and it was a disaster and went back on it. But I'm like doing it the right way now. And I'm like, so feelings are coming up that I haven't felt in years, like just because I'm not like numb anymore. That's like essentially what the medication does. It just kind of like tones your feelings down. So now I'm like, okay, I'm starting to have feelings again. And I've been doing the exact same thing that you just said. I've been like, and I've never done this before, but I've been just journaling things and like, it's good. It is like, it's good to feel your feelings. Like, I think in the past I would feel them and have an immediate reaction to them in some kind of way. Like I would resort to like a bad coping mechanism, or maybe I would fight with people in my life, like blow up, that type of thing. But now when I feel things, I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna smoke a cigarette or drink or eat a bowl of ice cream, because those are like the things I used to do, or like freak out at somebody that upset me. I'm gonna like sit with my feelings and like write them down and really think about them, and it's amazing.
Yeah, no, it really is. And especially with the freaking out at people thing, like I used to kind of, I wouldn't say I would freak out at people, but yeah, if I had a problem with somebody or something upset me, I would react like very emotionally, kind of in the moment. Yeah. And now instead of doing that and being able to sit and process that first, you can formulate maybe like a better response than saying like, you're an asshole or whatever. My mom actually gave me a piece of advice when I was very young that I obviously didn't listen to until now. And she said, if you're ever feeling angry or upset, wait 24 hours before you do anything.
Yeah, so you have more time to like...
Yeah. And as a child, I was like, that's stupid. Come on, Mom. And I think it actually is a really great piece of advice in retrospect. Like if something's really bothering you, take a day and then do something. Because if you react emotionally, like you might do something you regret.
I think it's like, it's important to express your anger, but again, it has to be like respectfully, maturely, in the
productive.
Productive. Yeah. It has to be like, okay, a means to an end. Like we're trying to get to something here. We're not just yelling at each other for no reason. But you're 100%. I agree with that. It's like the journaling helps. It's like write it out, sit with it, talk to a friend about it, get a second opinion, talk to a therapist. I go to a therapist. I'm a big fan.
I was just going to mention that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Therapy really helps too. I see my therapist weekly, and like just being able to go to her and kind of bring whatever I need to bring to her. Yeah. And there's certain things that like you can talk to with your friends that you don't want to mention to your therapist, and vice versa. Like certain things I can talk to my therapist about, I wouldn't be able to talk to my friends about. So it's nice to have that full support system.
Yeah, because even sometimes like I don't want to put too much on my friends. Like I'm like, I don't want to be the annoying friend who always has a problem. You know what I mean? So I try to like be more mindful of that now. Like, okay, I don't need to always call my friends with my issues. Sometimes that's what friends are for. But then other times if I like talking about the same problem over and over, then I'm like, all right, this is for the therapist.
Right. Yeah, definitely. You know? And it's good to have like in the case where your friends can't be available for you, to have those individual coping skills like journaling or maybe writing comedy or whatever it is that helps you sort through those, you know, hard times.
Do you feel like comedy is therapeutic for you in any kind of way?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. Yeah. So many, like, I don't want to say so many, but a good handful of my jokes I've written about, like, difficult experiences. And I think that that really helps me not only, like, process them, but kind of find the silver lining in them. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what specific examples I could give, but just about like, you know, a breakup could be made into a joke, or like family issues or mental health issues. I joke a lot about my mental health, actually. My first show I did at Lemongrass, like almost the entire 10 minutes was about my anxiety. But it went over well, and it was actually like a really funny thing that I was able to joke about, something that I've struggled with for so long, and that's really like inhibited my life. I was able to kind of turn into this like really cool thing. I
think essentially that's what comedy is. Like when you even think about, I mean, that's like a whole nother, like it would take like a scientist to break this down, but like when you even think about like when someone falls and trips and then they're okay, everyone just like laughs. It's kind of like, oh, we're okay, we didn't die. And I think that's like kind of what comedy is. It's like making light of the situation. Like, okay, we didn't die, we made it, how could we find the silver, like you said, find the silver lining. So like 100% on board with that. That's really cool. Yeah. I even started noticing, like, when I first started doing comedy, I would notice I would write bits that I didn't even know were like a problem. Like I would write a bit and then later be like, oh my God, I'm having this serious issue because I keep writing about how I'm miserable in this relationship. Like I remember like when I first started doing comedy, I was in a relationship that I was like very unhappy in, and I kind of was like numb to it or avoidant of it.
Right.
And then every joke I was writing was about like being in a miserable relationship, and I was like, oh my God, I'm in a miserable relationship. Yeah. Like I just figured it out right now. Like it was like super therapeutic to just, you know, get all that shit out, you know?
Oh yeah, for sure. That reminds me of like when you tell a story that you think is really funny and then everybody else is like, oh my God, are you okay? And it's like, that's not normal. I don't know. I've definitely had revelations like that through my writing too. Like, Jesus Christ, like, am I okay?
It must be, because you said you record your sets. It must be weird sometimes to like look at your own sets.
Oh yeah, it is. It really is. Yeah, I have a hard time watching myself. Like I'm probably, when you post this podcast, I'm probably not going to watch it for like 2 weeks.
I used to have body dysmorphia. Like like straight up, I used to have it. So I totally get that. I don't have it anymore. I still like, I'm self-critical of myself. Like I'll look at it and be like, oh my God. Like even right now I'm looking, there's like a weird hair sticking out. But I've just like, I don't know. I'm 33. I've gotten over it, I guess you could say. I'm not over it, but I've worked through it. You know. How old are you, by the way?
25.
Oh wow, so you're young. Yeah. I was really fucked up when I was 25. So you're in a good place. It seems like, you know. It seems like you're working through your stuff. Okay, you also mentioned that you were like big into not only mental health but relationships, which kind of go hand in hand with mental health. So my question for you was, I feel like every relationship isn't a failure because you learn something and grow from it. So if it doesn't work out, what is something at this point in your life, you're still pretty young, so it's ever evolving, but at this point in your life, what is something you've learned from previous relationships that is like, all right, now this is a deal breaker for me going forward. I've learned this from the past. And it could be either way. It could be like, I won't accept a guy who does this, or it could be more self-reflective, like, I won't do this anymore, you know? So what's like something you've learned from the past?
That's a really, that's a good question. Yeah. Well, something that I've definitely learned through past relationships is people are who they show you. So I used to struggle. I mean, right now I'm in a happy relationship with my boyfriend. We've been together for a few years, but
I've seen him. He's mighty cute, if I must say.
Yes, he is. Mark, if you're watching, Andrea thinks you're cute. Yeah, I've been with him for a few years and we are pretty stable and healthy. And like we work through a lot of issues in a good communicative way, which is great. But through past relationships, like both romantic and platonic, I think I used to hold on to this idea of like, oh, well, he's not treating me good now, but maybe if I do X, Y, and Z, I can win him over. Or my friend is being mean to me, but if I just act this way, like they'll start being nice to me. Yeah. And I've learned that people are who they show you that they are. And like trying to kind of change yourself to fit somebody else's mold
isn't going to work, because at some point it's just going to come to a blow up no matter what.
Like total recipe for disaster. And in terms of red flags, I mean, just lack of respect, I'd say, like lack of honoring boundaries. One of my old friends who I don't really talk to anymore had this tendency to kind of push me to do things I didn't want to do, and not even in a productive way, like go write comedy or go do music and do things that make you happy. It'd be like, she'd want to go to a party and I'd be like, no, I don't really feel like it. She'd be like, oh my God, you're so boring. Come on, let's go. And like, she would kind of like not accept no for an answer if I was ever feeling like I didn't want to do something that she wanted to do. And now in retrospect, I'm like, wow, that was like kind of not cool. And like, I don't want to say it was like crossing a line because it wasn't that severe, but when people don't like respect your boundaries or take your answers for what they are and always trying to like persuade you to do things you don't want to do, it's like, just stop.
That's actually, it's funny. That's kind of my next question. How do you, I asked this also to my last guest, but I love this question because it's one that's been on my mind a lot. How do you deal with when you reach a point of conflict with a person that like you know this isn't going to work. More friends, because like with boyfriends, it's obviously like, okay, you break up.
Yeah.
But friends and family, I'm going to say, do you think it's acceptable to just like cut someone off? And if so, do you like have a formal talk about it, or do you just like slowly fade away?
I think in a situation like that, it's important to state your problem and your needs and kind of like set that line. So like, how do I say? For example, let's say like your family is always asking you for money or something.
Yeah.
And it's starting to really bother you. Like, state your problem like, hey, mom, stop asking me. This is not a personal example. I'm just sorry, mom. But let's just say it's your mom. Like, mom, I need you to stop asking me for money. If you ask me for money again, like, I'm not going to answer you, or like you're going to cross this boundary that I'm setting of like, I want you to stop doing this to me.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of in their hands. If they continue to do the thing you wanted them not to do, without having a conversation about it or like really honoring your feelings in it, I think it would be reasonable to be like, hey, like, I'm not going to talk to you until you kind of figure this out.
That's kind of the point I've gotten to too, where it's like, I try to have, if I'm ready to be on the outs with somebody and someone's irritating me, I just give them a chance. I'm just like, all right, let me state my problem. Here's my case. Please stop this. If they freak out and blow up, well, then that answers it. Like,
exactly.
It's obviously not going to work. Mm-hmm. If they respect it, and I've been in situations where sometimes people do, and it's like the greatest thing. Yeah. It's a rare find. It's a rare, like when someone's like disrespecting a boundary or crossing a boundary, and you actually like try to have an adult conversation about it, and they're like chill about it. It's like, be that person's friend. Like, that's proper communication.
For sure. And that's like a really good kind of like litmus test to see who can hear those things without personalizing it. Yeah. I think a lot of people will hear any kind of like, because it wouldn't even necessarily be a criticism on them. If it's just like, hey, I don't really like this thing, that's okay, I don't like it, But I feel like some people would hear that and be like, oh, well, you don't like when I do this thing, and what does that mean about me? And you don't like me. And it's like, you don't have to personalize it. It's not about you as much as it is about the person telling you.
That makes so much sense.
Okay,
so we're going to move on to the next segment, which is I take questions and answers from the listeners. I got a lot this week, so I'm sorry if I missed yours. I'll probably share yours with the next guest, but there's some funny ones here. And there's some really good ones here. So Eric Roper asks us, how do you determine as a comedian what lines not to cross? So, which is a really good question because it's really hard. I want to know your opinion about that.
So fortunately, I have only written about my own experiences thus far. And I don't think there's any line that can't be crossed when it's personal to you and your experience. I don't really write about controversial stuff yet because I still am fairly new, but I probably will get more into that. But as a comedian, I wouldn't feel comfortable writing about, let's say, a group of people or an identity of people that I am not affected by or I don't experience. So like, I wouldn't want to make jokes at the expense of like transgendered people or gay people because like I am not in that group. Mm-hmm. And I don't really think that's my place to joke on them.
Yeah.
But like a gay person, I don't think there's any problem with them making gay jokes because they're at that like intersection of oppression, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And that actually perfectly segues into a different question on here, which is by Natalie. And the question is, and this is another good question because it's like a hot topic right now. What do you think about people wanting to cancel Dave Chappelle's special?
Well, I definitely don't think Dave Chappelle is going to get canceled just because he's Dave Chappelle and he is huge. And I'm pretty sure he got like millions and millions of dollars for that special alone.
Yeah.
I agree that like the people who are offended have a right to be offended. Absolutely. I think he said some controversial stuff. And I think he said some stuff that like maybe wasn't fully his place to say it. Mm-hmm. However, I know that he is a pretty brilliant comedian who has a tendency to talk about really controversial things, and they usually serve like a greater message.
Yeah.
I did watch the special. I thought that overall it was good and it did tell a good message, but there were a handful of jokes that I was like, oof, that's just mean. Like, I didn't think they served a good purpose. I didn't think they were really even clever. Like, I think, like, I don't know. There were a couple where I was like, dude, like, that's fucked up.
I've heard Whitney Cummings say this once, and I really liked it. I feel like comedy is one of those things that it's like an art form that you're continuously figuring out like what boundaries to push, and some people might push too far, but it's part of the thing. Like, it's all part of what it is to be a comedian, to try to figure that out. And I really liked what Whitney Cummings said. She said that the comedian has a right to say whatever they want to say, and the audience has a right to react however they want to react. And I'm like, that's really fair. It's like, I guess that's my opinion on it. It's like, yeah, maybe some of his jokes were offended, but I think comedy should be an art form where it's like freedom of speech. I think it should exist in comedy, but like, I agree with kind of like what Whitney Cummings was saying. It's like, but at the same time, if comedians have this like thing, like, I'm a comedian, I should say whatever the fuck I want to say. Well, the audience should also be offended if they want to be offended.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
I think that's a really good point, actually. Yeah. And I agree with that. I don't think there should be any topics that are necessarily like off limits, because I do agree that would be like silencing people. And I think people should be allowed to joke about whatever they think is necessary to joke about. But from my comfort point.
Yeah. For your personal view.
Yeah. Like, I just wouldn't be comfortable joking about something that like I either don't have any experience in or like I'm not knowledgeable about. Like, it just feels, not only would I possibly be offending somebody, I also probably wouldn't even know what I'm talking about, you know? Like,
I made, the only time like I made jokes that seemed to offend the audience was when I was talking about a relationship that didn't work out, and I was kind of like cracking jokes about the guy. Like, I don't want to get into who the guy was, but I had a male audience, and they did not like it. And they told me afterwards, they were like, you know, like, I'm not going to get into details about it, but I was kind of making like bad sex jokes or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, and my audience that night was male, and they were like, some of them came up to me and they were like, sex is hard, you know?
No way.
It was one of those things where it was like, okay, that crossed the line. You know what I mean? Like, and like, I asked everybody's advice. I'm like, is that too harsh? Like, and someone gave me like an interesting perspective. They're like, listen, like, you're not going to win the males over with that one. Like, you just like hurt everyone's feelings. But he's like, but like, maybe the females would love that. And that would be great, like, for you to connect with a female audience that way. So he's like, play around with it more and like, see. But like, when I have a mixed crowd, that joke, like, those types of jokes do well. And when I have an all male crowd, they're like hurt by it. So I'm like, I feel bad. Like, you know?
Yeah. But I mean, you're also joking about like your sex experience. And if you had shitty sex with a guy, like, I feel like you should be allowed to say that. And like, I kind of feel that way too with some crowds, because I make like a Donald Trump joke about how he's like racist or something. And I think once, he didn't say anything to me, but there was a guy in the crowd who looked like very offended by that joke. And I was like, oh no. But at the same time, like, I feel like joking about stuff like that, like politicians or like famous people, is okay. Like, you can rag on them because he's fucking Donald Trump. Like, you know, he was one of the most powerful people in the country. But when you're joking about people or groups of people who are oppressed, I think that's way more contentious, because those people are already like so held down by society and have so many stereotypes about them and so many negative things coming their way. And then for me, like a white girl, to start cracking jokes about race or something, it's like,
that wouldn't work.
That's absolutely not my place. And I don't even think that kind of stuff is like funny coming from somebody like me.
Yeah, it wouldn't make any sense coming from you.
Yeah. So
have you gotten into any crowd work yet? Like, do you make fun of the audience ever? Personally, I'm not good at this. I'm kind of curious where you're at with this.
Yeah, no, I haven't done it yet. Last night I did an open mic, and I went with my roommate, who is a man, and we are not dating, but we are both in relationships with other people. And one of the other comedians pointed us out and was like, oh, like, how long have you two been together? And we were like, no, we're not together. We're in other relationships, but we're roommates. Yeah. And he was like, y'all are roommates and you're not having sex? He was like, a man and a woman living together? That's crazy. Like, and then throughout the night, we became like a running bit, and every comedian started making jokes about my roommate and I. And when I eventually went up, I was like, I feel like I have to comment on this. And that was probably the extent of crowd work that I've done. I kind of like ragged on my roommate a little bit, and I incorporated him into a punchline of a different joke that happened to work out well. But in terms of like hecklers or just talking to the crowd, like,
I feel like I've done similar things as you. If like something in the moment is very obviously in front of you, like I'll take it. But but like some comics will like start off with purposely talking to the crowd.
Oh yeah.
I've never done that yet.
I've seen comics start out with crowd work and go with that the whole time. Yeah. Like, hey, what's your favorite whatever? And then they just riff off that. I haven't done that.
I'm the same way. I'm very like regimented. One of my friends is really good at crowd work. He's insane. His name is Sam Mushman. Sam Mushman. Check him out on Instagram, Sam Mushman. But he's like so on the spot that I'm like intimidated. But another thing he said was like, yeah, but I'm the opposite of you, and sometimes I rely too heavily on it where I don't write jokes. And he's like, so whatever your weakness is, you have to try to work on that. So he's like sometimes being regimented would benefit him. Like he's like, I could used to be a little more regimented. So it's like you have to recognize your strength and work on your weaknesses is the advice he gave me. He's been in the game for a while, so I'm like, I'll take that advice.
Yeah, that is good advice. Because if you have a crowd that's not really willing to interact with you, then you're kind of screwed up there.
Exactly. Or the other way around, if you're like kind of the way you and I are saying, where we're more like stick to our jokes that we wrote that day. Sometimes you have a crowd that just wants to be fucked with, like that they just want to talk to you. And then I've had that happen before, where like they weren't really into it, like as far as hearing jokes, they literally just wanted to be heckled. And I'm like, oh, I feel embarrassed. Like,
yeah, I definitely wouldn't be able to do that. I also like, especially with the question of what lines to cross or like how far can you take your comedy, I would feel so weird, like insulting, not insulting, but I guess like fucking with a random stranger and being like making jokes at their expense or doing whatever it is that crowd work does. Like, I don't know. Who knows how they would take that?
Yeah, it's a little intense.
Yeah.
Next question is by Travis. Travis is actually one of my neighbors. He's like, he follows me on Instagram, and he saw my question thing. So he wants to know, what do you do when you're have writer's block or in an artistic rut?
So what I do personally is switch art forms. That's why I do music, art, and comedy, because when I get bored of one, I usually switch to a different one, which isn't good because I need to stick to things. But in terms of writer's block for comedy, I try to get inspired. And I do that by either going to open mics and looking at other comedians and being like, okay, if they can do it, I can do it. Yeah. Or watching stand-up comedy, like some of my favorites I'll watch on Netflix, and I'll try and like take inspiration from them. And honestly, sometimes it just comes really naturally. I'll be going about my day and something will be really funny, and I'm like, oh, that's funny, and I need to write about that.
That's exactly what I do too. Like, I feel like the best bits or jokes come throughout the day randomly when you least expect it. But I've been trying to get into the habit of forcing myself to sit down and write every single day, because I'm like reading some books about stand-up now, and I'm hearing so many references about that. And I've heard like on different podcasts, comics that I really look up to say the same thing. They're like, you have to show up and start writing even when it's not natural, because just by doing that, you're like shaking up something in your brain so that later that day it'll work. Like, does that make sense? It's like a muscle that needs to be exercised. Seinfeld said it. He's like, sit down and write 20 minutes a day, even if it's a blank paper. Just sit down and try. So I've been doing that, and I have been noticing it's like super beneficial, because I used to not do that. I used to just only wait for things to come to me, and it has been really nice to like, not always nice, because sometimes it's really frustrating, but I don't know, I guess to kind of like piggyback off of your answer and this guy's question is like, I think you just have to keep showing up, you know, even if you have writer's block, and something will come. You have to just trust it.
And those sorry to cut you
off.
No,
go ahead.
Those ideas that you write down when you are like kind of forcing yourself to write, those can really flourish into great ideas later, because now you've like planted the seed, you know? Yeah,
there's something about writing things on paper that like gets it there.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Kind of like the journaling thing, but same thing with like writing jokes. It's like, you know, or even typing it, that's fine too. But like just getting something out of your head and putting it here, it's like, okay, now this is a concrete thing. Now later when I'm at the grocery store, I'll be like, oh yeah, that was the thing I was trying to think of, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a good point too.
I'll actually, you know, I'm going to throw one more question in there because we still have a little time. I didn't write it down, but I remembered it. So my one friend, she asks, and I think this is a good question, but it's like kind of not a good question, but a good question. So she asked, if there was anything you can change about your personality or your body, what would you change?
Oh my gosh. That's a good one. Anything I could change about my personality? Probably my openness. I mean, this is a podcast setting, so obviously I'm more open and reciprocal here. But I think in public, it's hard for me to open up to new people. And especially like in the comedy world, I think that's a huge drawback because it's really good to like mingle and network and talk to people and like share ideas with people. And I kind of like go to open mics, do my set, sit down at the table, watch other comedians, and then leave.
Go home. You don't really network or anything?
Not so much.
The night I met you, you were on a roll though. You were like talking to everybody.
Yeah, well, that was fortunate because there was one comedian who came up to me and he was like, hey, I thought your stuff was good. And I was like, great, you can initiate this conversation. But it's very rare for me to go up to people. And I think I did go up to you probably honestly because you're a woman and it's a lot easier for me.
More comfortable for you.
Yeah, it's a lot more comfortable and easier for me to talk to women in like a public setting. But like going up to male comics after their set, I actually saw a comedian that I know last night at the open mic, and I went up to him after his set and I was like, hey man, good stuff. And like we're like kind of friendly and like I've seen him around a lot.
Which comedian was it?
It was Kyle.
Colorado.
Yeah.
He was on my podcast. Shout out to Kyle.
Oh,
Colorado.
he was.
He's so nice.
He is very nice.
He's the person who got me into comedy, into the stand-up scene, because I decided I wanted to become a comedian during the pandemic and nothing was opened. So I literally went to Instagram and I was like, hashtag New Jersey comedy. And his post was the first thing that came up. So I was like, I'm just going to message this person. I have no idea who it is. And I was like, hey, do you know where any open mics are? He gave me like pages and pages of text, like that he wrote, like, go to this one, go to that one. I was like, holy shit, he's so nice.
Yeah, he is really nice.
He's helped me move into this apartment. Like, super cool dude.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely not like friends with him on that level, but I have like seen him around at mics before and we've chatted a little bit. And even him last night when I saw him, I was like, hey, like good stuff. And even that, I was like feeling almost nervous to like just compliment his set. Like I'm very reserved most of the time. And I do wish that I could kind of break that social barrier easier.
I can agree with that. I'm kind of the same way. It probably doesn't seem like it, like when I ask my guests like really weird questions, but I think, you know, you're younger than me. I think when I was 25, I was really shy at age 25. And I think it's just like years of growing into yourself or whatever, or working through your shit. But like totally, like I can agree with that. I'm kind of the same way. And that's actually one of the reasons why I even do comedy, because I know the person I am in my head when I'm like talking to myself in my own head is outgoing, and I don't present myself that way in real life. So the like when I'm running errands or whatever, meeting people at parties, I'm like super reserved. Or like even in college, I barely made friends in college because I was so shy. So I feel like my polarizing like personality is like the outgoing part of me is just like ready to bust out, and that's why I'm like on stage. It's like it's weird. It's like balancing myself out in a weird way.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, and I agree. That feeling of like being on stage almost feels different than my persona in my day-to-day life. Yeah, you know, because I can joke about things on stage that I probably
would never say
to like, I mean, I'd say it to my friends and people I'm close to, but yeah, I would never tell a story like that to somebody I just met. But like I can go on stage, and maybe it's because it is a comedy show and people expect like outrageous humor, but it's so much more comfortable for me to go on stage and tell like a really personal and revealing story than it would be for me to like say, hey, what's up? Like, good set, you know?
I've heard a lot of comics say that they're socially awkward in real life, but then on stage, like they talk about the most personal things. And it is so fascinating. Like it's such a crazy, again, I think it's just like the human nature trying to balance itself. Like it's like, you're going to go fucking crazy if you just hide all your feelings for the rest of your life. So it's like, oh, I'm just going to go on stage and tell them all at once.
Yeah. And it's like a performance art. It's like, I don't even have to be like Caitlin on stage. Like I'm kind of like comedy Caitlin, which is slightly different. And it is nice to, I don't want to say I take on a persona, because I definitely don't put on like a character, but it's kind of in that realm, you know?
Yeah. We also have to answer her part of the question that says physical. Do you have like she said, what would you change about yourself, personality and physically?
Physically, probably my nose.
Oh, I like your nose.
I have a crooked nose.
So do I. I mean, I don't know if it's crooked, but I I have like a total like Roman nose, like, or what is it called? Greek nose. I think I have a Greek nose, or it's like got that bump on it.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that's crooked, but it's just like a big schnoz.
Yeah, I have a small bump too. I don't mind big noses, but mine is like, I don't know. If you look at it from this angle, you can see that it's...
I would have never noticed in a million years.
Really?
It's not something I notice on
now
you.
Everybody knows.
I would say for me, I would want to change my skin because I'm aging and things start to look differently. I'm starting to get these like wrinkles over here just from like frowning so much in life. So I'm like, that definitely
from frowning so much in life.
So I'm like, definitely something I would change. Like, I wish I could just like have 23-year-old skin like for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I feel that. Well, I guess I don't feel that yet, but probably when I get older, I'll be feeling that way too. But I don't think your skin looks bad. And you're definitely not at that age yet where you need to be worrying about wrinkles.
People get Botox at all age. Like, I've heard online that like people get Botox now. I think women get Botox at like 20 now to prevent them, which is kind of smart. Like, it's kind of sad, but also really smart at the same time.
My friend Isabella does that actually. She's also a comedian, but she's not in Jersey. And she gets Botox in her forehead because she's like 25 years old. And she's like, yeah, I just want to prevent aging. But it is, her skin looks great.
She's on to something because I didn't do that. And now I'm like, shit, it's too late. But I don't know. I always wondered like what would happen like long-term use of Botox. Because I feel like Botox is a relatively new thing. So like the people that started taking Botox aren't old yet, you know? So I'm like, I do have some like debates about Botox. I'm like, oh, that would be nice, but like, what's going to happen if I just keep doing it forever? Like, what's going to happen to my skin? You know?
But if Botox is relatively new and they're not old yet, how do they even know it's going to prevent aging? You know, is there like actual research to support that?
Good question. Yeah, that's.
I wonder if everyone's just wasting their fucking money.
I think so. What happens with Botox is that it numbs your muscle to the point where you can't make the muscle, and they say that you can't make faces at all, like, so, which is kind of like crazy, but so like they say that one of the reasons for wrinkles is the faces you make, like, you know, like when they say you're little, if you make that face you're gonna be stuck with it. It's like kind of true. like because I'm like a thinker and I have like permanent wrinkles here now, and so the whole idea behind Botox is like, well, if we freeze this muscle, when you're thinking, you can't make that face, so you can't age. I mean, you can age in other ways, like you can still get dehydrated. There's other ways to like look like shit, but wrinkles, no. But like, my question is like, but Botox isn't permanent. You have to keep going back to do it. So like, when those muscles are just being like numbed like that over the time, like what's going to happen if like one day you can't afford Botox? Are you just gonna have this like sagging face now? You know, it's just like,
that's a good question. Yeah,
muscle tone is probably a good thing in your face,
right? Yeah. I feel like I'm gonna go home now and like research Botox studies, because that is interesting. What would happen? I don't know can your face make muscles? I don't think so. The same way you can like work out a bicep.
Yeah,
like
so little secret for you guys. I don't like if anyone's even listening this far. I did get Botox one time on these wrinkles because I was insecure about it. It's so expensive, so I didn't go back to do it. But the first time I went to do it, nothing happened. I still looked wrinkly. And then I came back and they're like, make the face again. They're like, your muscles in your forehead are so strong. Like, wow. Because I had just been making that face so much. You know? So yeah, it can. I mean, it like, you're not going to grow a big face. Right. Yeah. But like within your face, it's like, yeah, they could be strong.
Interesting.
Yeah. Very strange Botox. So let me know, guys, in the comment section, like your views on Botox. You think it's like a good idea to get it at a young age, or not into that kind of thing, into natural beauty, whatever. Anyway, so we've just answered all our questions for the day. So that was it. Let them know where they can stalk you and find you if you want that.
Yeah, I would love that. So I have I have 3 Instagram accounts, actually.
I didn't know that. Oh, I knew you had 2 because I saw the art one.
Yes. And then in addition to my art page, my friend Jason and I host this weekly show on Thursdays called Doing It Live. And it's where we, at the count of 3, we both, one of us says a noun and one of us says an adjective. Mm-hmm. Do you want to try it with me?
I'm scared, but I'll try it. Okay,
do you want to say the noun or the adjective?
I'll say a noun.
Okay. So, and I'll say an adjective.
And we say it at the same exact time?
Yeah.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Squirrel.
Oh, I was going to say swirly. So that's actually
weird.
funny that you said squirrel.
Did you say swirly because I said squirrel? It was just coincidental.
I think it was just coincidental because I went to go and then you said squirrel and I wanted to hear yours. Okay, so swirly squirrel would be, if this were an episode of Doing It Live, that would be our topic for the evening. And we would have to make that out of Play-Doh, whatever we think that physically represents in Play-Doh form, and write haikus about it.
What the fuck?
So that's our show. It's called Doing It Live.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, you can follow us on Instagram. It's at Doin, so DOIN period it live.
What's the funniest one that happened on the spot?
Oh man, there've been we've had so many episodes now. It's hard to even remember. One of them was funny. It was pensive shorts. And that one, because then at the end we also sing a little song about it. We just play on a ukulele and sing a little song. And it's really bad art. It's the worse the poems and the sculptures are, the funnier. And pensive shorts, I remember, was a really good episode. But there have been a lot. There was fast grass. I think last week was pathetic trophy. One of them was wet eggs.
That's really funny. That's good improv. That would help your comedy.
Yeah, it does. And it's fun too, because my friend Jason is he's actually in improv and I don't think he does stand up, but he does a lot of comedy work. He also does a Twitch show and he does improv comedy and he's great to bounce ideas with. So that's our show, Doing It Live. And then my personal Instagram account is just at Kaitlyn, KaitlynMko.
Yes, that is Kaitlyn, everybody. Kaitlyn Michelle. It was such a pleasure to have her here. I could relate to her on so many levels with the comedy and the music and anxiety and stuff like that. So it was such a pleasure to have her. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit like, leave a comment on anything that piqued your interest throughout the episode. And that's it. Thank you so much, guys. I will see you next week for next week's episode. Bye.
Bye.